Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at our InNoVAtion Lunch and Learn. This is one of the ones that we have here at the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, and the Lunch and Learns help to be part of our commitment at staying at the forefront of transportation innovation. Each of these 45-minute sessions are used to highlight actionable technologies, either recently implemented or ones that are likely to be deployed within the next 5 years. And our goal is generally to inform and to engage stakeholders across both public and private sectors. My name is Alyssa Beyer. I'm a regional transportation planner here with NVTA. And we are looking today at doing a talk on the NoVA floodplain platform. This series in general aligns with our Transportation Technology Strategic Plan, or the TTSP. It guides how we assess and integrate new technologies to support our long-range regional vision, and the NoVA floodplain map presentation today helps to connect directly to Strategy 6, which is maximizing the potential of physical and communication infrastructure, and Strategy number 7, which is enhancing regional coordination and encouraging interoperability in the transportation system. This topic also aligns with NVTA's core value of safety. The NoVA floodplain map is a platform that uses real-time data on rainfall to support local planning, storm analysis, and emergency response efforts. It allows us to get a better picture to prepare for and address extreme weather events that results in floods and flash flooding. It improves monitoring and communication about rainfall and allows jurisdictions and agencies to work together to plan for and address major events. Before we really get into this, though, we are going to make sure everybody is awake and with us by launching a poll. In just a moment, you should see a poll here on your screens. This question is just to gauge your knowledge of this topic. How familiar are you with the NoVA flood map platform? Either not familiar, slightly familiar, moderately familiar, or very familiar. All right, we'll give it just a couple more seconds here. And Kristen, if you could go ahead and close that poll and share the results. We see that most people are either not familiar or slightly familiar with this platform, so we all have a lot to learn today. And with that, I'm happy to introduce to you our speaker, Nora Jackson. Nora is a resiliency planner at the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, or NVRC. She has been at the NVRC for 4 years, but her current role as a resiliency planner is a new position, which is very exciting. She is a certified floodplain manager, or CFM, and is on the board of the Virginia Floodplain Management Association. So without further ado, I will go ahead and stop sharing so you can share your presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Alyssa, and thank you for the invitation. We really appreciate the opportunity to share the NoVA flood map. I'm really excited to, let's see, I don't know, I'm not seeing the sharing capability. Oh, there it is. Disappeared from me for a second. Here we go. All right. Again, thanks so much for joining. I'm really excited to be talking about NoVA flood map today. I think it's also especially timely given the storms that have been coming in over the past couple of days in DC. There's been quite a bit of flooding in the Northern Virginia region, as well as some other extreme weather impacts. And I'd also like to just take a moment to acknowledge some of the devastation that's happening in Texas right now. For folks who are in floodplain management, can be pretty heavy to deal with. And so I thought it was important as we're talking about this topic that we really are we're talking about people's lives and health and safety directly. So it can be pretty heavy, but hopefully we are doing some things to kind of help prevent some disasters like that from happening in the future. And so I'm going to be talking about our let's see, get that to work. There we go. Just about how the platform was developed, like why we came up with it in the first place. And then I'll go through a demo, so how you can use it, how to download data, view it, interact with it. There's other related weather data available on the platform as well. And I'm going to go through some of the additional capabilities. There's still a lot left that we want to do. There's more data feeds, there's more dashboards, there's a lot of work left to be done, and we do have it funded for the next 5 years. So we have 5 years to kind of work and look at the impact of the platform. And then I'm going to close out with a small example from a partner organization, the Water Institute and Rice University, using open source data and AI for a safe roads platform, which is a really, really interesting tool. uh, Again, helping prevent people from getting trapped in floodwaters. So I'm going to just introduce kind of set the stage a little bit for some of the flooding hazards that we're facing here in Northern Virginia. And so, the platform truly came about because extreme rainfall is causing a lot of havoc for our infrastructure, interrupting people's daily lives. It's flooding our parking lots, our roads, people's backyards. And this 2019 storm was kind of the biggest example of this. It's often referred to as a wake-up call for the region. 4 Mile Run, which is in that upper right-hand corner, rose 11 feet in about an hour. And if you look at rainfall data from like Dulles Airport, it said that it was a 100-year storm. But if you look at rainfall data from elsewhere in the region, it says it was a 1,000-year storm. And so that was kind of that first indicator that, wow, maybe we need a little bit more information to understand what's going on and the impacts on the ground. And so it's that combination of those extreme storms, those extreme rainfall events, and we have undersized 20th century infrastructure and 20th century models, right? And none of that can really keep up with 21st century storms. And so this is what I started doing, and what I became a resiliency planner at the commission. And so working with floodplain managers, stormwater engineers, public works staff, anyone who has to deal with flooding on a daily basis in all of the jurisdictions that the NVRC serves here. And so this is where I first started figuring out what was going on in the region, what people were dealing with, and it did seem that we were dealing with a lot more flash floods than we had previously in the past. And so through the work group, we learned about some individual localities that were putting in their own rainfall runoff monitoring networks because of the impacts that they were experiencing. As you can see, the floods and flash flood events, we may not be getting more of them, but they're really, really intense, and the impacts are much greater and the hazards are much greater from them. So Fairfax County, Prince William County, as well as the city of Alexandria, installed their own rainfall monitoring networks individually. They all happened to be the same company and did not know it. And so that was kind of where this project came from, was how can we leverage those existing investments that our localities have already made, knowing that this is a very crucial issue for them, and help share some of the data across the region, because as you know, floodwaters do not stop at political boundaries. So this is kind of where it started. I joined the commission in fall of 2021. That was about when I was hired. And this was the first thing that kind of came across our desk, was how can we get this information and data up so people can see it and use it? And so we applied for community flood preparedness funds and received a little bit of money from that, but it wasn't enough to do what we wanted to do, which was put all of the gauges on a public platform. But of course, over time, the software and the hardware were both acquired by one company. So previously, people were putting in these networks, they were working with multiple types of hardware and software, and they are now all under one umbrella, which kind of streamlines everything a little bit. And then another opportunity came up with a congressionally directed spending request. We said, well, how about we leverage some of that CFPF funds that we received where we couldn't make the platform, ask for some appropriations funds to pay for the platform. And that's where the funding comes from, actually from NOAA. And thanks to our senators Warner and Kane. And so we kind of started working on a new scope of work of what we could do with the smaller original funds. And so working with AEM, just establishing what gauges are out there, how many there are, who owns them, who operates them, if they're even reading properly, things like that, and if they could be used to integrate into one network. And so we started working with them. And then since then, actually, Arlington decided to come online with, again, the same company, and they added gauges. So there's a lot that's happening in the middle of the development of this platform, and things are kind of constantly changing. And it took a long time to get this done. But we finally, we completed the audit, and we determined with our localities that maybe they did want a public platform. There was some hesitancy, I will say, originally in making this information public just for security reasons, especially sensitive equipment. People were a little uneasy about having that information out there, but then over time, kind of realized the benefits of having it publicly available. Because the city of Alexandria already had theirs publicly available. So it's kind of an example. We were leading off of them to kind of show as a use case to folks how useful it could be. And so we developed that new scope of work. And again, this is the NOAA funds. And then we were able to leverage an existing data sharing agreement with COG, actually, because all of our jurisdictions already signed, just to acknowledge that we're going to be doing this and sharing the data publicly. But that sets us up so that we can expand it even further in the future. So if we do want to include DC or Maryland, and it can be a whole region approach, that gives us the ability to do that. And then it was only, recently, earlier this year, they started building the platform. And I got my administrator training so that I could start building it and what it looks like now. It's the Elements 360. So again, at this time, AEM has already come out with a new product that's a little bit different than what we were originally looking at. And so this is a multi-hazard decision support tool. It's mainly used for emergency management. And this was but this is the best place we can get to view this data and this information. And so we really wanted to get it out there so that I could release it during Flood Awareness Week, which was in early March of this year. And so that was when we promoted the platform to kind of go alongside with Flood Awareness Week, with all of our localities putting out kind of a social media toolkit that was kind of for the region. And so that was our introduction to it, and we've been working on it ever since. And I think I'm going to pause here for a poll before we get into the demo.
Thank you. Yes, now that we've gotten a little bit of background here, I'm interested to hear from everyone. What current aspects of the RainGauge platform are most interesting or helpful for you? The first is viewing and downloading live precipitation data. The second is topic or location-specific dashboards. The third is communication regarding changing rainfall patterns and flood risk. And lastly, we have increased facilitation of reliable and equitable flood. Great, we're seeing some responses start coming in. And we'll give it just a couple more seconds here to lock in your votes. All right, great. Kristen, you can go ahead and close out that poll. It looks like the top one right now is topic or location-specific dashboards, followed closely by communication regarding changing rainfall patterns and flood risk. Thanks, Nora. Back to you for the demo.
Thank you. That's great. That's also very helpful for me to know as well as we start doing more with the platform. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. If you want, you can scan this here and it'll take you Google NoVA flood maps. Also, you should be able to find it pretty easily. So you can follow along a little bit on your own, but I just wanted to give folks a moment to pull that up on their own before I start the demonstration. Okay. When you go to the platform, this is going to be your homepage. And like I said, this was originally designed as a multi-hazard management platform for emergency managers or emergency response. And so you are typically going to have it a login, but for public purposes, it actually is logging you in as a guest every single time someone looks at it. So that's how I'm able to track how many people are looking at the platform. And so this is where we just put a little bit of information about the project, a little bit of info about changing precipitation patterns. There's a map inset here, and this map has all the same functionality that the rest of the platform has when you go to the map page itself. As you can see, you have all of those layers there. And then there's a couple of options, so you can kind of go directly to rainfall maps here. When you hit that drop down, and all of those different increments are going to open a new tab to a map that automatically shows that increment that you're interested in looking at. So that's kind of the easy shortcut way of just looking at what's going on recently. Additional resources, nothing too much there right now, but just, help, NVRC information, etc. And then again, yeah, changing precipitation patterns is kind of one of the most important part of that homepage for me. We don't have much in the bookmarks yet. The dashboards, I'm going to finish that at the end. The sites, it's just a list of the names of the sites that are included. But the map is where we're going to start interacting with some of the data and some of this information. So just to start off, at each of these little dots, when I say it's a site, that doesn't just mean that it's one sensor there. There's actually there could be multiple sensors at each site. And so you can kind of look at this as the different feeds. So we could look at just City of Alexandria. You can select which one, it brings it to you directly. But we kind of want to look at everything else here. So we're going to look at all of the sites. So the legend, this is important to notice. You kind of see the green means that whatever's there is operating fine. We typically never see any of the orange, but the gray timeout typically means that the rain gauge might have some debris clogging it, or it's been so long that it kind of just went into sleep mode because it hasn't reported rain in so long. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's an error, but those are pretty frequent just because of the nature of how interrupted some of them can be. And then you also have a sharing link there. Like I said, the list of sites, you can toggle the names on there as well. That's a little bit more useful if you're looking at a smaller scale. And pay attention to that icon at the top. Those are the sensors. And so that's going to show you all of the different weather types of sensors. Like I said, it's not just precipitation, but there are some general weather stations. So you can pull up things like air temperature, flow volume, dew point, wind speed, etc. And so when you select that sensor, a specific sensor, it's going to populate in the map and kind of give you that real-time data. The thresholds option, we do not have a ton built into this yet. This is something that we are able to build. Again, when it reaches a certain point, we can have it trigger notifications, alerts, or changing colors, something like that. So, if it rains a certain amount, gets to a certain temperature, that's what you want to look at. So we have all of these options. We did just recently add some USGS stage gauges. And so these thresholds, because they're coming from the USGS, which are already baked in, there is a legend there with the thresholds that are showing some of that information. I'm going to go back to all so that I can still view all of the sensors. That's pretty easy, simple base map. Everyone knows what that is. These additional layers are pretty interesting. There are some options to do some time controls in there as well to look at changes over the past hour. And so in all of these, we can add more too. So this is something that we can put some more maybe like local layers on, locality layers, things like that. But this is really interesting. If you turn on that toggle, that's what opens the time capability for you. And so even with some of these that don't have that time icon in it, it still does have some movement. And that flag there, that's how you turn on the legend. So you can kind of see that pop up on the bottom left-hand corner. And that is for the opacity, right? So you can kind of see what's going on underneath. Pretty standard, most folks know. But as you can see some of this as it goes, it's doing the previous hour from when I had selected, and there is some slight movement going on kind of in the left-hand side of the screen. So it is kind of really cool to kind of see that the active information. But we got to turn the time controls off because this is just going to keep happening. It'll keep playing, as you can see. I didn't have to press play or pause. It's kind of constantly running. And again, that's just looking at some of those different options that you have. The daily rain rate. Yep. All right. And at this point, I want to go ahead and check out one site because this one site in particular does have a precipitation gauge and a stage gauge. So we can kind of look at that. I know that this is 4 Mile Run Alexandria. And so you can find it this way, but you can also hover over obviously the site itself to pull it up. And that's how you're going to see that list. It shows each of the sensors at that site. So you can see, click on it. There's only one sensor available at that site, just the rain increment, as you can see. But we're going to go back because I want to look at that 4-mile run so that we can look at the stage as well as the rainfall. And again, pay attention to the icons. Every time you see that, that's referring to the sensor itself. And so selecting that will take you to the sensor page or show you a graph. Is pretty straightforward to kind of show you that information. And you can again look at it in a different way. It's going to tell you that in a different format. We don't have anything else, and I don't have any like photos or notes or anything added to that, or thresholds. Again, like I said, we haven't baked any thresholds into the platform, but that's something that it does have the capability to do. I'm gonna go back. That gray is like, that's so you can see the list of sensors, again, pictures, comments, and that flag is showing that that's the site itself. So I'm gonna go back to the list of sensors, and we're gonna check out one of them, right? So I wanna look at the graph, the stage gauge. We're seeing the thresholds that USGS is built in there. If you remember the legend before of those colors kind of showing you the different stages of the flood. All right, we've opened a new tab clicking on that sensor. So this is the rain gauge sensor at the 4-mile run site near Alexandria. I'm gonna scroll down. This is actually from back in June. There was a little bit of rain over the weekend, and I recorded this for another demonstration. And so this is where you're going to download your data. You scroll down to the bottom. It's pretty simple. It's pretty basic. It's recording information every 5 minutes. So do remember that it is a lot of data and it's a lot of records that you're pulling, and it's going to give you the last 7 days because of that. And so when we're looking at some of this, I'm like, oh, that's 1 day. It's looking at daily 24 hours. So, let me look at when it really rained. So you can change your time horizon there. And this is kind of the best part. This is when we're really looking into why it's really useful to have 5-minute increment rain data, because that's how different the rainfall can be within that time frame. So remember how I said 4-mile run rose 11 feet over the course of 1 hour? It would be really helpful to have that rain data, every 5 minutes rather than after that hour is complete, right? And just so you can see this a little bit better, this is just a little bit more easy to visualize. You can see when you hover over it, it does tell you the amount that was recorded. And then we want to go and look at kind of the impact of that on the stage gauge, right? So you can actually go down to the top there and click on the stage gauge directly. And so now we're looking at that flow, the response from that. And as you can see, it did maintain the same date range already because I was on that same page. So that's also incredibly helpful to navigate it this way. When you do look at this, there is a way to kind of zoom in when you're looking at the minor, like moderate stages. You turn off thresholds and it kind of zooms into where the highest level of that stage is. So you can look at it in a little bit more detail. So that just kind of helps you view it a little bit better. And again, you can see that rise happening. So remember, it was just 1 hour of rain that we were looking at before. And that's exactly what happened in the response. And then because there are thresholds baked into this, they are also going to be shown here as well. And again, data available to download. Same thing as the rainfall data. That graph icon there this is the newest feature that I discovered that I think is really fantastic, is so you can overlay multiple sensors on top of each other. So this is the best part because I want to look at the rainfall in addition to this stage reaction, right? So you click on the graph and this is where you can add different layers. So this is I want to search that site, right? I want the 4-mile run site near Alexandria. And I already have the 4-mile run stage there, and there's a list of sensors. It's on rain increment. I'm going to double check. I'm going to hit add, and you can see it come up on the graph there. And so that's when you know it's going to work. And I hit graph, and now I can see the rain increment laid on top of my stage gauge. And so this is kind of what I think is what is going to be most interesting for folks is looking at kind of that response, the runoff response when we receive that much rainfall. So if you go and you put it to an hour, you can see exactly in that one time frame about 1.5 inches, and that's all it took to almost make it to that next stage and level of notification. All right. And before I move on, just briefly, I'm gonna introduce the dashboard. So next, this is something do want to create more of. Again, like I said, or not like I said, but Alyssa mentioned in the poll, we do want to create some more location specific or topic specific dashboards. And so I have one here just as an example of what we have used this data to create. So this dashboard is kind of more of an overall like weather information, maybe a little bit more for the public or a general audience. But it does show you automatically what the last recorded rain increment is. And I also have a couple of radar layers up on there as well. And so it kind of introduces the dashboard, what you're looking at. And so this is very similar to those folks who use ArcGIS and ArcGIS Online. It's not as easy to build as a GIS one of their dashboards, but it still has that same idea where there's different widgets that you can put in there, and you can also automate. And again, like I said, you have all of the same options in the map insight. You have all of the same capabilities there that you do have on the regular map page. And so this is really interesting. It's been to look at all of the different radar, especially because you can see the storms coming. And I know this is like typically where the storms are, their pattern is coming west to east, and so we can look at it through that. It's also interesting because they have the different types of radar to kind of look at the difference. I was out walking my dog one day and my weather app on my phone said it wasn't going to rain. And I turned on this one and it had radar raining and it was actively raining. So I knew that this one was a little bit more accurate. Like I said, you can still turn on that accumulation, opacity, legend, everything is still there, all of the same functionality. But the coolest part is these tiles here. So all of these places have multiple rain gauges, but we have it programmed here to kind of just show the gauge that has most recently recorded the most amount of rainfall. And once it records rainfall, it automatically turns orange. So again, that's like a threshold that I have built in and baked into here. And again, makes it useful as a dashboard for management purposes for someone who's monitoring something. You can have it up and have that visual signal for yourself. And so that's really interesting because you don't want to see a whole list of like 30 different stages for one place. So this kind of keeps it a little bit easier to take in. The National Weather Service story, air temperature, again, our data disclaimer, and then watches and warnings. So if this was yesterday, this would have had a flash flood warning up on it, right? But this was back in June. And so this is kind of the idea of what a dashboard would look like. And we can make this, by watershed or by weather topic, and make it for specific use cases. And so that's something I'm hoping folks can kind of think about and come up with some ideas of what you could use it for, what kind of dashboard specific topics you would be interested in seeing. And so that is kind of just a quick overview rundown demo of the platform. And some of the capabilities and next steps that we want to do. So like I mentioned, the data exchange outputs, so we can add inputs and we can do outputs. So if someone is interested in receiving this data, you can set up an API exchange so that you are constantly receiving the live data or near live data, because there's about a 5-minute latency usually involved with the communication side of things. We are currently adding more stage gauges, so the flow side of things. We have the USGS included, and we are working with the localities to add the ones that they own and monitor and work on themselves. And like I said, the topic or location specific dashboards. We still have funding available in the appropriations to purchase additional monitoring equipment. So, those rain gauges can sometimes cost like 10 grand a piece. And so being able to kind of expand the network would be really helpful. And this GAR, or Gauge Adjusted Radar Rainfall, is a really interesting product that is specific to AEM that several of our localities are already purchasing just for their own locality. And again, we think that this could be more beneficial if it was done at a regional scale. So what GAR does is it combines radar data and on the ground rainfall data to come up with a more accurate distribution of where rain falls in between those gauges. So many times they're miles apart, and we know that it can rain several inches in one place and miles away it will be zero, right? And so trying to figure out what happened in between can be incredibly valuable. And that kind of leads into the post-event analysis, as well as looking at the response in the infrastructure to the event, as well as, typical positioning of supplies or emergency response in general. It can really help with informing our models in particular. And I think we have another poll that we're gonna
We
make
do.
sure you
Thank you.
guys
That's
are.
so interesting to see how that dashboard works. That really looks like an awesome tool to have. So our next poll will be coming up right now, and it is what future capabilities are most interesting and helpful to you? So we've got adding stage gauges, additional monitoring equipment, gauge adjusted radar rainfall, or the GAR, GARR, and post-event analysis. If it's one of the other two, feel free to add that one in the comments. And speaking of comments, if you have any questions that are coming to mind while Nora is talking, feel free to add those as we go along, and we'll get to those in just a bit while we do our moderated discussion. All right, give it just a few more seconds here and then we can close it out, Kristen. Perfect. So it looks like the top one here is post-event analysis. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate those polls too, because again, it is helpful for me to know as I move forward. So I think we're going to move on here, and I'm going to show an example use case for some of why this data and why this data being open is so valuable, specifically in our region. And so one of the partnerships that we had was with George Mason University, and kind of working about like what students can do in making applied research to something that's happening locally in the climate resiliency space. And something that I had heard a lot of happening was flooded road closures and emergency managers having to respond to people being trapped in their cars in floodwaters, right? And so we wanted to look at kind of how frequently that was happening. And so through that partnership with Mason and the Flood Hazards Lab, we did have a grad student do kind of a quick analysis using some VDOT data about flood-related road closure frequency. And the data it's pretty messy, so I won't say too much about that, but it has been really eye-opening to look at the amount of flooding that happens outside of our regulated FEMA floodplains. And that has been a really key communication piece. I think it's important to note that this is kind of happening a lot more frequently. And so even, the head of the Flood Hazards Lab, who's Celso, who took this photo a couple years ago in July, was like, oh, it doesn't happen up here. The roads don't flood as much. This isn't Norfolk. And then this happened on the way to pick up his kid from like a daycare or summer camp where they charge you if you're late. So this is kind of an example use case of what someone who's faced with crossing the road in this condition, like what comes to mind in their decision making, right? So they think it doesn't happen here, it can't be that bad, and oh, I just got to go pick up my kid, or else I'm going to have to pay them. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking of when I think of the impacts that this tool can have on transportation specifically in our region. And so the example that I would like to share with you was from Rice University, Jamie Paget and student Pranavesh, and then from the Water Institute, Mutu. So I want to say thanks to all of them for sharing this really, really great platform, Safe Roads. And so this was kind of developed looking at Hurricane Harvey in Texas and kind of the impacts of the roads, because there is a lot more that we could be doing to help better prepare and also respond to these events. And so they're taking kind of that, again, open data that they can get that's available from things like Department of Transportation and Waze, and also kind of looking at like the current status of things and why we're struggling to kind of monitor roadway flood impacts. And you can kind of see what they're able to do is combine all of that, right? And so they wanted to create a better situational awareness tool using AI to sense flood impacts on roads in real time, because that's when we need it. That's when it's most important, right? And it should, be accessible to all communities and something that is open and free to use. And so essentially that's kind of the case that I'm trying to make, is why it's so critical to have open data and information like this, because it allows us to share with each other and learn, and also because we're improving that data availability and providing that to all of these different sources to help our communities prepare for some of these extreme rain events and hopefully avoid some of the terrible losses that can happen. I'll just go ahead and close out with some long-term plans. Like I said, we have, I guess a little less than 5 years left of the platform, but there's a lot that we can learn from it, and a lot that we can continue to do. And so in general, it's just going to help us with sensor management and reporting and streamlining that. Like I said, model calibration, having those on the ground measurements is so much more helpful than older 20th century models that we know are not very accurate for the storms we're getting today. And it's also going to help us with long-term network planning. So for example, if USGS needs to put in a new gauge somewhere, but a county has already put one in nearby, they'll know that it's there by looking at this, so we can kind of reduce redundancy. And that regional GAR product, like I mentioned, I think would be incredibly valuable, again, like because all of our localities are already making those investments. And most importantly, I think I'd like to mention is the best practices for installation and maintenance. So the one thing that we hear over and over again is how much maintenance that rain gauges require. So this, as beneficial as this information can be, they take a lot of time and energy, and having dedicated service providers, because we have so many in this area organized at a regional scale, I think could reduce a lot of work on the locality side, as well as hopefully provide us with some financial savings as well. And so that's kind of ideally what we'd like to do with the platform in the long term. And I liked this snippet because you can see that orange of the tiles, that's when they pop up, and it shows that most recorded rainfall. And that is gonna finish out my presentation, but I was doing my regular thank you slide, which is blank, and I said, oh my gosh, there are so many other people that were involved in making this happen. This wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the localities doing this in the first place, and then funding that was made available from DCR and NOAA, and then also the institutions and agencies that kind of help us understand and frame the problem that we're facing to kind of make a better case for why this investment is worthwhile and necessary. All right, and I'll go ahead and close out, and we can switch over to the moderated discussion and questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, here we are at the Q&A. Very excited to get to dive into this a little bit more. And so some of the questions that we have came in through the form beforehand, and then hopefully we'll continue to get some more here in the chat as well. So let me see if I can access the chat, and I can. So we have actually a few in the chat, and we'll start with those. So Daniel has asked about if the recording will be available or a copy will be made available. It will be added to our YouTube channel, and regarding the presentation itself, some of that will be available as well. Whether or not we're able to get the actual demo is a little bit dependent on whether the technology cooperates with us, but we will be adding what we can to our Google Slides, and that will be linked on the YouTube. So hopefully that answers your question for you. We also have a question from Jordan asking if this will be incorporate AHPS gauges.
Could you clarify what AHPS gauges are?
And Jordan, you can do that either by responding to your comment or by coming off mute, whatever you're comfortable with.
So my understanding is that NOAA separately has some gauges that are like when NOAA lists on their National Water Prediction Service, they have some additional gauges to the USGS ones. Some are lakes, a lot of them are riverine. Um, I wasn't sure if those are incorporated with what was imported from the USGS sites. I know they work closely together, um, but I think they're separate gauges. And some,
They are. You're correct. Yeah. No, I know what you're asking now. I feel like I could answer this. So those gauges, so like USGS operates their own, and those are the ones that are in there now. And the ones that you're mentioning that are on the National Weather Service, the water dashboard, those are ones that are owned and operated by the individual localities. And so that is going to be just we're hoping to get that up soon. We're working on getting permission from them. Like I said, kind of in the beginning, there was a lot of hesitancy in making some of this information publicly available. So we kind of started with having the rain gauges up and USGS gauges and kind of showing that proof of concept. And then we're going to hopefully be able to incorporate those gauges next because they are already publicly available on the NOAA website. So I hope that answers your question.
And then we also, oh, perfect.
it's,
Thank you. And we see we have another question from you as well, Jordan, about the gauge sites along the Potomac being registered to Maryland, and if those are also included.
Yeah, so they did put in some that are in Maryland as well. Like I said, because we have that connection with kind of the DC metropolitan region in general, and because of the nature of how our weather systems move in the East Coast in this region, I think it is kind of incredibly helpful to have what's kind of going on, upstream, downstream, everywhere, just outside of NVRC as well.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, and then we had one more question come in the chat so far, and that is the process for adding a gauge.
So if there is a gauge that's already on the ground that is existing that a locality has that we want to put into our platform, it's pretty easy. And so I just have to set up a data feed. I can, depending on the availability, it can be done by AEM will do it for me, or I can do that myself as an administrator on the platform. If you're installing a gauge, I do know that I have never done it myself, but I know from just firsthand knowledge that it can be sometimes difficult to do. I know that we do have some folks in Loudoun who have gauges that are trying to just find the time and places to put the equipment in the ground. And so adding a gauge is easy on the platform. Getting it on the ground might be a little bit more difficult.
That makes sense. And I know we're almost at time, so I'll ask one more question, and then Nora, if you have the capability to stay a few minutes after, we can try to tackle the other ones.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the first one is from Natalia V, and it says, what methods are used to validate real-time data received before pushing it to the dashboard?
So a lot of that is done through AEM at the platform level, and so they have multiple processes, but they do like temporal consistency checks. So making sure that they don't have intervals that change too rapidly. They're looking for anomalies like negative numbers. There are some like internal diagnostic flags that are built in there as well to assess performance, and they do flag suspect data, and that does not get put through. As an administrator, I can check and look and see what data has been labeled as good quality in the platform itself, but it is really good about not letting anything come through that hasn't been checked. And so there's a lot, like I said, they use statistical quality control. I think they're using like historical models to look at it. So as well as some smoothing. So it's a lot. It's not. I don't have too many more details on that, but a lot of it is kind of done on the platform side for us.
Great. And then we are basically at time. So before you head out, we're going to set up one more poll here. And that is going to ask how the flood map platform is connected to your daily responsibilities. So you can select what field you're in. If it is something else, please respond in the comments. All right, answers are coming in, and so far largely lean toward planning, either transportation or resilience planning. Although we have also got some folks now who are responding that they're in emergency response planning and implementation, as well as transportation operation. We'll close that out in just a second here. you've got something else to add, go ahead. All right, go ahead, Kristen. Thank you so much. Okay, so thanks for giving us a little bit extra time, Nora. If other people have to drop off, we totally understand, and you can find the recording, like I said, on our YouTube channel. Other questions that we received, and if Daniel's still on, you can tell us if we responded to this property with the question earlier. But it was about not all river gauges being shown for an area, which are available from the NOAA and NWS Middle Atlantic River Forecast Center, particularly Lake Appomattox. So I think you answered that, Nora, but if you've got anything else to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because they have that information that's available online right now, and I could just include a link to it in the chat. That would be wonderful if we can get that added. It affects my community and my daily commute. So I'm in one of those bright yellow areas that was shown on the map that showed a high propensity of flooding. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm definitely, and it's good to hear the feedback as well, because that helps me when I'm working with our localities to try to get that information added to hear that it is useful. So thank you.
All right, and then the last one that we had in advance was from Emma S. And it is, what are the biggest challenges to transportation resilience in NoVA? If you could change one thing, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. And I wish I had a little bit more time to think on it, but the biggest impacts that I think we're seeing, again, I'm not a transportation planner, but just from my experience, participating in some of the regional planning groups and things like that, it's really flooding and extreme heat specifically. And I think flooding is kind of the most severe. And the one thing that we could do to make it better is just having much more accurate, much more up-to-date data that has nothing to do with what FEMA has laid out in our says our floodplains are. So that's kind of that's the brief and short version is better data.
Thank you. All right. It looks like that might be it. But if anyone has additional questions going forward, please feel free to reach out and we'll try to get a response to you. Thank you once again, Nora, for your insights today. We really appreciate getting to learn about the platform and all of the capabilities and the future of it. I also want to thank everyone who submitted a question or entered into the discussion. It's always so fun when we can all be engaged in the conversation together. Keep your eyes out for information on our next InNoVAtion Lunch and Learn as it becomes available. The speaker and topic will be announced on our LinkedIn page. And then here, you can always scan this QR code, join us on X or Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, and you'll learn more about our programs, plans, and future events. Just scan the QR code there. Thank you once again, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you.